Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off XL, where for July of 1995 we are bursting at the seams, as we have 6 magazines to look at. And in this mammoth episode, we are checking out the one for Amiga, Amiga Action, Amiga Format, CU Amiga, Amiga Power, and making a reappearance, it's CD32 Gamer. Fight! Let's start with the one for Amiga that had 2 discs, 2 demos and a PD game. And Blitz Bombers is where we're starting, an A1200 only title, which is a bit of a pain as at the time when I bought this magazine I couldn't play this one, which was a shame as me and my mates would have played so much of this multiplayer only demo, where up to 4 players can take part. Just don't try to play this one player. The demo will just immediately end. In multiplayer mode you get 5 minutes to blast away around the maze, and the goal, if you don't know Bomberman or Dynablaster as it was known on the Amiga, it is to blow up the other players, or have them blow themselves up. You start off with a single bomb with a limited range, and as you find upgrades and additional items that will change. And there does seem to be a decent range of upgrades for you to try out. This is a nice looking game, but I'm not entirely sure why it required the power of the A1200. And also, this game could be classed as unreleased, as Hudson Soft tried blocking the game from being sold. And by the time they worked everything out, it was too late to release it as a fully paid up title. So it ended up getting released as freeware. Flamer. The first PD game of the episode is Woogalies. This is a block-pushing Sokoban style game, but with a twist, as our goal is to block the Woogaly so it can't move. Its goal is to track us down and eat us. And it can do that by moving in any of the main directions, including the diagonals. Our saving grace is the fact that we can move more than one block at a time, where normally in these sorts of games you'd expect blocks next to each other to actually stop the movement. The visuals are a mixed bunch. There's some nice animation on the characters when they move, and when you're eaten. But the boxes, well, they just jump to the next square. Overall, it's a fun shareware title, and I did play it quite a bit, and it gets much harder when you have to deal with more Woogalies at the same time. The final demo for the one is Super Street Fighter 2, that starts off with the iconic intro for Super, but this is the original Amiga version of the game, so expect this to be limited. But from the start, this is looking and feeling so much better than the original version of Street Fighter 2. Even if the music is a little poorer, I think that might have been done to accommodate the sound effects, and I think having sound effects and music at the same time is far more important for this game. What also lets down the side a little bit is the fact that Blanka is grey, rather than his normal green. But it is computer controlled, which is a step up from some of the beat 'em ups that we've seen. But this is also one player only, so you can only play as DJ. You can't even attempt to play as Blanka, which also means you can't play against your mates with this one. This version also seems to be joystick only, and I can't seem to get it to do anything different with the second button either. This demo also has issues when you play it on an original A500, as it has a habit of crashing, which isn't great. But I guess that lets the users of original hardware know what the game is going to be like and to avoid it. But overall, this shows what a step up it was from the original ports. But at this point, we had Shadow Fighter, so did we really want Super Street Fighter 2? And even if this is a bit of an aside for these videos, this was the last one for Amiga in its current form, with the writers not expecting to have to do any more releases after this, to the extent that the text for Wooglies mentioned that this was the last thing the writer will ever do for the magazine, and that they also had to cancel a special money off promotion for this game, with them having to put a sticker on every single copy, as well as another one on the discs. Now we know from history that the one for Amiga would continue, but that was under a new management team and a new publisher, Maverick, and that is not known for being the best run for the one for Amiga. CU Amiga is up next with 2 discs, 2 full applications, as well as a full game. Adderage 2 is the first program, and it's the upgraded version of what we've seen previously, as now they have AGA support. Like previously, this is a visual effects editor that lets you play transitions and other effects on various images. It's faster than it was before due to the extra power of the A1200, but really you want to throw this at an A4000 to make it really fly. Like last time, it's fun enough to mess around with, but I couldn't think of a situation back in the day where I really would have used it. Outside of just messing around anyway. So this isn't a program for me. Neither is the next one really, which is Powerbase, a database system. After loading up one of the examples, we get this really annoying upgrade prompt that takes ages to go away. I thought this was a full version, not nagware. This seems to be styled around Access, or Access might have been styled around this, or they might have all had a common lineage. But it's that style of database where we define fields with a few types, and then we can move through the records, looking up the data or adding new ones. Though this seems relatively advanced, as you can add external data or calculations and limits. You can even password protect the database if you want to store some secret information. It does have a bunch of interesting things. But at the time, I may have used it to catalogue my games. Maybe? But outside of just learning databases, again, not something that I would have used when I was a kid. The full game is Arcade Snooker, which is effectively Team 17's arcade pool updated with the snooker rules. It's also AGA only, unlike pool. This feels like it might have been a mostly finished game that Team 17 decided that they were just not going to publish, and ended up giving it to CU Amiga. As it turns out, originally this was meant to support older Amigas, and it also was meant to have an option to save. But that turns out to be broken, and they didn't have time to remove it, and also at the last minute, they must have had an issue and decided to make it AGA only. Oh, and if you do try to save, then it'll actually overwrite the boot block of the disc and it won't load. Awesome work! It's not often that a magazine has to print 2 separate warnings about a game or a demo. But I guess in 1995, things were not all that great for the Amiga and its magazines, so they must have accepted anything they could get their hands on. The presentation is basic, but it works, as there's no real animations or fancy touches on the graphics. It's the simple top-down view of the table, but I do like the sound effects. Now, just like in Arcade Pool, you can line up your shots, set the power, and go. And overall, this is a competent take on the classic game. But I feel the AI takes a little too long to take its shots, particularly for how often it seems to make mistakes. In fact, in some of the games, I think I got more points from its shot penalties than I got from pocketing anything. But if you're a fan of Arcade Pool, then check out Arcade Snooker. Let's move on to the future and the CD with CD32 Gamer. And on that single CD we have 4 demos, some shareware, some scene demos, as well as some more PD. And it starts off with this basic menu with some awful music that sounds like it's playing way too fast. So let's quickly jump into Gloom. This is a single level demo, and it seems to be a unique one, as this doesn't show up in the final game, even if parts of it does. This also feels like it might have been early in development, as we don't get floors or ceilings. And the visible area on screen, well, that is definitely smaller than the final game. It also has a different weapon upgrade system, as here we can step up through the weapons by collecting the fists. Where in the final game, you'd collect new guns every so often, but you could also upgrade those. The baddies for the most part are the basic ones that you'll get in the first few areas of the game, but you do get to fight some of the robots. But they will go down pretty quickly if you find the secret room with all the upgrades. It's a fine enough demo that shows what the game has to offer, and has some really weird textures that I swear are just the name of the game, but stretched so much it's barely legible. And it seems I have to apologise, as it turns out that was the only real demo on the CD, as those other three, they are all videos. Not rolling demos, actual low quality, low resolution videos with absolutely no sound. So instead, we get more of that wonderful music we got in the menu. And as we can see, we have Jungle Strike, that I assure you is being played, even if it is not very well. We actually have played a demo of this in the past, I believe. We also get PGA Tour Golf, which is another game that we've seen a demo of. Why they couldn't get that for this CD, who knows. What makes this video worse is that its frame rate is so low, it doesn't look like it's being played on an A1200 or CD32. And finally, we have Football Glory. It's not my kind of game, even in this video form. It's not exactly wowing me with its sensy look. And that music that I was complaining about before, well, I actually looked into that a bit. And they are using a program called Algo Music, and this is from its guide file. Algo Music is a little program that creates and plays a song randomly out of a series of algorithms. Try it. It sounds nice. It lies. So let's quickly move on to the PD games to see if they included anything good. First up is Grid Runner. And you might be thinking, great, a Lamasoft game. Turns out, no. This one was made by Mental Image, a group that made collections of PD games. Which means this is a clone of another game, which itself was a take on Centipede. And like the game that it's based on, we have to shoot down the creature that's coming down the screen, which will make it break up, and the different parts of it will move on their own, and attack on their own. On top of all that, there's craft along the X and Y axes that will shoot at you from time to time. So there is a lot going on, and it all moves at a fair speed. It's a lot of fun, as you might expect from a Jeff Minter game, even if it's not his direct version, but I know some people weren't a big fan of the Super Grid Runner that was released for the Amiga. Next we have The Simpsons, in what I can only guess is not an official game. Not with that artwork, and not with it being made in Suke. Yes, this is the shoot 'em up construction kit game. And wow, that is something.
I'm Bart Simpson. Who the hell are you?
There is so much stuff going on with so little time to react, and then it just blasts you with ripped and borrowed sound effects at the same time. I'm not even sure how many levels there are, as I could barely make it into the school level. I simply have no words. Though the soap does. So let's move on to Cracker. This turns out to be a version of Mastermind. which is something that I used to really enjoy playing. From the physical edition that you had to play against someone else, to a version of the game that I made myself in True Basic for a school project. So I wish that I could have known about this one back in the day, as I really would have played it a lot. Now if you're not sure how this plays, the computer will randomly pick 4 colours, and there can be repeats. And you have to work out the colours and the order that they are based on taking guesses and being given clues. The clues are a combination of either it being the wrong colour, the right colour, or the right colour in the right place. Typically the hint order is completely random, so you can't infer what clue goes to which peg, so you have to use pure logic to try and work out which of the pegs are in the right place. Overall, it's a really nice looking version of the game, with the odd sound effect as well. These CDs also like to include scene demos and animations, but due to how long some of them are, I think I'll show a few random bits and pieces of them, and let you just bask in the glory that is scene demos. For our first shareware game, I had to go with Morton Strikes Back. This is the AGA version, and it is looking lovely. Better than some of the commercial games that we've seen. And I really do enjoy those little animations on Morton when he gets close to the edge. This plays nicely as well, as it's just a basic platformer, but it's done so well. As really, the only goal is just to make it to the exit. But on the first level, we get wings and we get to fly around. On later levels, we get to go underwater. That has this really cool shifting effect. We featured this game before, back when it was known as Smidge, but that was on the original Amiga. For this version, we got upgraded graphics with some parallax scrolling going on, as well as they managed to do music and sound effects at the same time. From what I remember, they also added new levels and more levels for the AGA version. I couldn't tell you if the ones for this multi-level demo were from the full game or made just for it. The last game that we're going to be looking at for CD32 Gamer is Ants. A game that I was a little unsure of at first, as those backgrounds for the levels look interesting, but it wasn't immediately obvious what you needed to do. And then after a bit of messing around and reading the instructions, it just clicked, and it turned out to be an interesting title, as we are controlling the ants, aka those little black dots. And what you can do is by holding down the right mouse button, you can highlight and select a number of them. So yes, you will need a mouse to play this one, you can't use a CD32 controller. And then you can use the left click to move those highlighted ants to where you want them to go. Now the main goal of each level is to eat the enemy, but every time an ant takes a bite of them, they will die. So you'll need to replenish your numbers, which is done by sending some of the ants to the fruit. Now this might make you think you can just build up a large number of ants and then avoid the hurty things in the level and take on the enemy that you need to destroy. And if it was that simple, where would be the challenge in it? Instead, you can only have a max of 100 ants on the screen at once. So what you'll need to do is send the bulk of the ants to attack while holding a few back, and then you have to go and try and replenish your numbers. It's an interesting game because as it goes, they keep adding new bits to it, like wood that you have to eat through to get further on. And I think, yes, I will have to return to this one. Off the presses next is Amiga Power, who included 2 discs, 1 demo, and 3 PD titles. And that first demo is for Ultimate Soccer Manager. Now, I had a soft spot for football management games in the 90s, and I used to play Premier Manager with my mates. So I would have actually given this one a go, even if I have almost zero interest in football and sports in general. But with its hefty 2 discs that you needed to expand onto, it might have been a difficult one for me to find 2 spares. The demo forces you to play as Brighton and Hove, which just so happens to be where I started my games industry career, so that's quite a coincidence. And for the demo you get to play 9 matches, if just to give you a taste of the game, with a few other bits disabled as well. Everything is presented via this graphical interface. The matches themselves are played from this top-down view, so you get to see what's going on and who's passing the ball around. Overall, it's a pretty decent looking management game, with music that I wasn't expecting. But even with this demo, I'm not sure it would have dethroned Premier Manager for me and my mates. The first PD game is that old classic, Missile Command. We've seen this PD game more than any other, and I think this is the second time that Amiga Power themselves have included it on a disc. This is a decent recreation of the arcade game Missile Command. Yes, they weren't too creative. And overall, it's not too basic in its looks and sounds, but it's also not too fancy either. And you'll just have to go around shooting down those streaking missiles, as well as trying to take out the cruise missiles that will hang around and require a direct shot, all while making sure your cities are protected. You also have to make sure you don't use up all your ammo. If you enjoyed Missile Command at the arcades, then you should really enjoy this version as well. So let's move on to the shareware game Springtime. A game that I feel is hiding itself behind this very colourful looking theme, as it's a puzzle game, and a really interesting one at that. The graphics might look a little simple at first, but there is a reason for it, as this is effectively a 3D puzzle game. As you'll need to move around the level, and you can move through the gaps quite easily, but if you push against a wall, it will actually make it rotate with everything else that's connected to it, and that will now become the floor. And the eventual goal is trying to make the spring land on the X, which might mean you have to move it quite a few times before it will land where you want it to. Annoyingly, this is timed, and you have lives. They really should have dropped that, as there's so many ways for you to mess up, like launching the spring off the map, or getting yourself into a weird situation. But there is something here. It's something unique and interesting. Unfortunately, I don't think the art style quite works, and I think they could have gone with a completely different direction, but it still is quite nice. I'm amazed that this ended up as being shareware, as it easily could have been published as a full regular game. Although, without a date for it, I'm not sure when this initially came out, and it's hard to say what the state of the Amiga market was, because if it was ran about this time, then yes, it might have been difficult to release this as a proper title. Because as we've seen, this month, games and demos were a little light on the ground. Power's final PD game is for Circus, a PD recreation of the arcade and 8-bit console game, Circus. This is not quite a classic game, but it's one that people will remember, if just with that, "Oh, yeah, that game," and then promptly try and forget. The reason for that is that it's actually a breakout style game, but that is obviously underselling it, as you have to launch the clowns up to the balloons to pop them, as you are getting one clown to launch another clown. If you miss by just a pixel, you'll get a very wonky funeral dirge. but you will be wanting to hit the very outside of that plank, as that will launch the other clown much higher and faster. The problems are obvious, as it's a little too precise in its requirements, with the controls being handled with the mouse, which can be a double-edged sword with the old ball mouse. And when you mess up, it takes absolutely ages to get going again. But when you do get on a run, it can be a lot of fun. Amiga Action pops up next, with again 2 discs with 2 demos and a PD title. And that single demo was for Ultimate Soccer Manager. And seeing it's the same as the last demo, let's move on to the PD, which is the exclusive For Action Mortal Kumquat 3, aka Fruit Fighter 3 Turbo GTI XL 4x4. This, if it's not obvious, is a comedy meme game. And I think it's quite clear what it's taking the piss out of. Now, it's a 2-player only title, and has such options as difficult and as difficult, 3 rounds or 1+2, and on and still on. It also has the most farty sounding samples that you'll ever find in a game. As well as some of the most shallow of gameplay as well, as it only has a few basic attacks, with punch and boot. It also has an auto-triggering finisher, with each fruit having its own version. But the basic moves are just the same. Same with the animation you get when you win a match. I do like the flags representing how many matches you've won. It's a funny and silly game that you would laugh at when you played. Well, you would at least for the first or maybe second time you play it anyway. The last demo from Action is Ruffian, a platform game that likes to boast about how quick and colourful it is. And it seems to be just that as well. It is quick and colourful. It even has an interesting mechanic with its attack. You can hold down the fire button to charge it up, and then you can aim by moving the controller around. It's just a shame the whole thing is, well, it's just a bit ugly. The gameplay is also quite basic, with you just travelling around this maze-like level, trying to find the fairies that you can break out of their bubbles, which you'll do by spitting at them. All the while, baddies will try and get in your way, which you'll have to spit at them. Now, there are a few pickups that make your spit better. I think it's meant to be seeds, but yeah, you're still spitting them out. And you can pick up more seeds to shoot as well. But thankfully, you always seem to have at least one reserve seed when you try to free the fairies. And after a while, they'll even try and hint at where you gotta go for the next one. And when you do get all of them, then the exit will be revealed. But it is also hidden in the level. It seems they had a publisher all lined up for this, as they show it during the startup sequence. But they dropped out at the last minute, most likely due to the Amiga market slowing down. And they ended up getting picked up by the budget and re-release label Explosive, which might make this their one and only Amiga release. And finally, we have Amiga Format, that over its 2 discs, we have a program and a demo. That program is Techno Sound Turbo 2. And I'm really hoping they've provided some examples, as I have very little musical talent. Which is obviously a problem when you're trying to show off a mod-making music program. Thankfully, there are a number of provided samples, so we can load those in and play around with them a little bit, as this really has been designed for creating and tweaking samples as much as playing and working with them.
Game over. Game over.
As hidden in one of the menus, we will find the tracker mode. and it's here that we can load up a sample track and play it. How good this program is and how well it stacks up to the other music makers, I can't really say. But it does seem to have a relatively simple interface that works well enough. The final demo for the month is Sensible Golf, a sensible game that didn't do all that well. But by all accounts, it wasn't really loved all that much inside the company either. It's presented in the typical Sensi style with the small human sprites, and overall it looks fine enough. It uses that very basic system for input that the other golf games used as well, as you can change your aim and clubs with the joystick, then press fire to start the shot off. The next press sets the power, and then the final one is how accurate you are. But the putting is a real pain, as you just get these arrows on the ground to indicate the hills. But it doesn't really tell you how steep it is, and it uses the exact same power system for trying to putt. It becomes really hard to line up those shots. It also is a bit awkward trying to work out the strength needed, particularly with how quickly that meter moves. But overall, it's a competent if basic attempt at the golf genre. I'm sure they were thinking they could take their Sensible Football series and transfer it to other sports, but this one didn't work out anywhere near as well as they hoped. And with that, we have covered all the magazines and its software, and it's time for me to say which my top 3 favourites were. And this month, I feel we're going to give it to the PD and Shareware, as in last place, I say Springtime. An interesting game with some fun and unique premises for the puzzle genre, even if I think it would be better if they went with a different inspiration for its art style. And if they'd done that, I think it could have been higher. In second place, I'm going to give it to Ants. Again, another interesting game, one that's also quite simple, at least when you know what it is you need to do, but there's this hidden complexity and strategy behind it. And in first, it's Morton Strikes Back. Yes, it's a fun platformer with a nice art style and some catchy music. What more could you ask for? So after a bit of a poorer game selection, CD32 Gamer managed to pick up some great shareware titles. And as always, if you think I got it wrong, or I missed something, or if you have anything else to say about these magazines, let me know in the comments. And until next time, I was the Goldfish, that was possibly a little too much content, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thanks for watching. I've been making these videos about Amiga cover discs for a good few years now. So if this was your first one, then you should try checking some of those out. Or you could like and subscribe, as I'm told YouTube really likes it when you do that.